Welcome, everyone, to Ladder Daily Digest and the amazing Maven and Megan Connor.
Hi, guys.
And so we had like 3 people waiting. We have 14 on right now, so that's pretty good. Probably my brother, my daughter, and all of Megan's friends.
Megan's
So today I thought we'd talk about sort of the divine feminine. Rob's going to introduce the show. And we're in Tim's living room, hanging out with Tim. He's going to talk about his divine feminine experience.
I have brought
later.
Jammy Dodgers.
You have some Jammy Dodgers? Wow.
I have some Jammy Dodgers.
Man,
And a huge Toblerone bar.
There you go.
Nothing but the best.
So
Aloha, Debbie. Good to see you.
Aloha, Debbie. Rob's gonna introduce the show with some stats or something, maybe.
Yes.
Nice.
Stand aside while I mansplain this women's issue. Okay.
That's right.
I credit some of my ideas from things that I have read, things that I have heard, and to Britt Hartley in part. I want to discuss this trend or this shift that we're seeing in society and in places Mormon and Mormon adjacent, which is that women are reclaiming and expressing their spirituality. And I see them doing this by going out and getting it with different tools, different people, and in new places where they're getting their spiritual needs met, to include the need to connect with theirself, others, and the divine, to express themselves and have a voice, to claim their spiritual powers, to find awe, transcendence, intimacy, and healing. And the methodologies for this spirituality that I'm aware of are numerous, but they tend to be more nature-based, obviously more feminine, more embodied, kind of maybe witchy, a little bit pagan, and more intuitive. And they include things, how many of these have you heard about in your communities? Reiki, energy healing, meditation, hiking and walking in nature, astrology, going to retreats that are outside of church, essential oils, yoga, tarot, energy readings, life coaches. That's a big one. I want to talk about more about that later. Psychics, embodied movement, sound baths, a lot of woo-woo stuff, maybe also to include psychedelics, ketamine therapy, things of this nature. But all of these things, if you'll note, they don't require patriarchy. And some of them, although not all, are actually backed up by science. And a lot of these insights that I got, like I said, came from Britt Hartley and others. And here's some facts. Gen Z, in particular, they dislike labels and they distrust large institutions. And they are inclined to identify as spiritual, but not religious. Women are rejecting the claim that that a man must stand between them and the divine. They don't want the intermediator anymore. Women are becoming accustomed to having their voices heard more in the workplace, in education, sports, and they're unsatisfied with being muzzled in church. COVID revealed that women emotionally missed church less than men did. Men actually really missed it, particularly with Gen Z, who are now attending at higher rates than women. It seems that the church is a public sphere where men can lead and mansplain and preach, where the home and outside of the home is where women tend to find more spiritual creativity. And in that context, they can lead spiritually. I also want to say that the internet is a big factor in this because it's allowing women to connect with new tribes outside of the ward boundaries or your visiting teaching assignments, right? The internet also makes access to new ideas and knowledge knowable. And finally, the consumer capitalistic culture in which we live is making it possible for practitioners of these healing arts to be compensated and make it worth women's time to get involved in this stuff. And I'll just end with 2 anecdotes before I turn it over to the rest of the panel. As I speak, my wife, Frances, is at a 10-day Vipassana silent meditation retreat. And I'm really excited to see, what comes of it when she gets back. And secondly, the last anecdote, I have an LDS.
So that's why you haven't heard from her in a while, because it's a silent retreat. Yet it's not able to contact you.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it, that she's going to come back and she will talk to me again. Yeah, I'm hoping. But the final anecdote, I have an LDS friend who's kind of prominent. I'm not going to mention her name. She and other members are posting on social media their attendance at women's retreats outside of church. And the example I'm going to use is a program called Rooted and Rising through the Tree of Life. And these women get together to dance, discuss their spiritual gifts, divine guidance, and then my friend gets up and sings songs about Heavenly Mother. That's wonderful, and it's certainly a shift or a change in the way things used to be. So I really want to invite others on the panel, particularly the women, to comment on what are you observing in your own communities, and how are you personally finding your spiritual center.
So I'd like to introduce everybody to Heidi Love down there.
Hi.
Hi, Heidi.
She's a podcaster, and she also speaks to the planet Xenu across the galaxy.
Yes.
Amen. Amen.
I do it for my spirituality. Don't worry.
That's right.
Okay. Is that next to Kolob? Okay, right.
Xenu
is next to Kolob. It's true.
Yes.
It's true.
Yes.
And hi, Maven. Maven has her own podcast, and she's on Latter Daily Digest occasionally.
Thank you.
Maven's a hero. Your intellectual, 12-year-old self was such a great listen. I loved that.
So,
Wait.
Maven, what's your time like?
Oh yeah, from my journal.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes.
I was it's embarrassing for a lot of things. I was 16, and then I need to find. There's worse entries than what I read, where I really saw this guy that my friend likes. It is absolutely 100% the devil's doing and getting her off the path of righteousness. So
Maven,
it's worse than what I read. So
You were get thee hence Satan. Just kidding.
Maven, how long are you here for?
Not long. So I was wondering if actually I could share a story, and then
So we'll let Maven
I'll
go first, because she takes priority in everybody's life.
We love Maven.
So I don't even know where you guys were started going, but yeah. So the subject being the divine feminine, I never I know there was part of me as a member that liked the Heavenly Mother idea, but there was just nothing to her, honestly, and she's not really there. So I never really quite connected with her the way that some other women do in the church, and I do love that for them, where that does connect for people. So even though Mormonism technically has a divine feminine, it's really kind of a big nothing. And even kind of how they want us to be as women, it's kind of nothing, at least as far as I feel like a lot of the teachings that I was preparing to do this, and then I've seen other women do it, where anything that's you that comes into conflict with marriage or family is something that needs to be discarded, is something selfish or, undermining. I think there was a talk where I think it was Packer, but he mentioned the so-called needs of women, and yeah, that's a quote. That's a real, yeah. And so it's just, just kind of this thing, and then this whole service thing. And then if you're not happy as a mom, then there's two reasons. First is it's your fault. Are you doing XYZ enough? Are you, full of gratitude or whatever? Are you being selfish and not just losing yourself in your family and service? And then the second person whose fault it could be was the feminists. If our women are unhappy, it's because the feminists told them that they're unhappy being moms, even though most of us here in this space, we've rejected that, but somehow they're still making us unhappy with our life choices. Anyway, so something that changed for me happened after I left the church. I was already an atheist, so that I think that's kind of makes things interesting. I don't believe in gods, and yet that's how I found it. And it was it was a trip to the UK. I went to the British Museum, and they had an exhibit about femininity and the divine feminine, really, and just cultures through ages, the different kinds of types and kinds of goddesses there are. And I was familiar with many of them, but as I'm going around and I'm looking at little statue figurines and like gold filigree art or paintings and just all of these things. One of the things that just really struck me is just the wide array of the depth and personality that other women goddesses had in other cultures. And I realized that like our divine feminine is really just nothing. It's just submissive, and it's just like, again, exists but not there in any other way. And there is a beauty, I think, to femininity can be submission, it can be giving and service and family and all of those things. But by I just felt like they really boxed us into something like really, really tiny in the church. And so when I'm looking at these goddesses, and they also, like, some of them had, kind of normal humanish characteristics. Some were really jealous, others, are intellectual, others are sexual, there's just, it's just everywhere. And almost none of them are one dimensional. One example was Shiva, and this was actually really common. A lot of times was a goddess could have like a fertility motif, this creative one, which is obvious and very understandable. But then also like the destructive one, this fiery nature, this or sometimes war even. So there'd be this duality there, and that made the whole being. And so I felt like there's a lot of power that I'm finding now in anger and in like being firm and just all of these things that were not what I was allowed to be. And it just felt so empowering, because I just felt like that's femininity too. That is mine, that is just part of the whole thing, and all of it is my power. It's the angry mama bear energy is our power, and then also the soft, the cuddle, like the hold the baby, that's ours. And then I just wanted to like share one more thing. It's I think the one goddess that I connect to the most now is a Greek goddess, and it's Artemis. And she's got an interesting kind of duality too, because Artemis is she was like fanatically against marriage. Now I'm not against marriage, but I am for myself. So I I understand that for her, like that she did not have that desire, right? And she was also like fiercely protective of her autonomy. So there are a couple stories where she was a hunter, so there were other like male hunters either trying to force themselves on her or peeking at her when she's bathing, that she would either shoot with her bow and arrow, or one of them she turned into a stag and he was torn apart by his own dogs. So there's this bodily autonomy, and also this kind of justice that sometimes women don't get when we are violated by men. So I like that aspect of her, that she's just a real feminist icon that way. And then she's also like because pairing up was not part of her, sexuality is not part of her motif, or maybe it is, but it's more of a lack of it. You know what I mean? That is part of it, but she's still a fertility goddess, despite being a virginal goddess and an unpaired one, and not having given birth. Because I know some goddesses give birth like it other than sexual ways, just depending on what the folklore might be. But Artemis's story is that her mother didn't have anywhere to give birth, and until an island was oh, I'm messing it up. There was somebody that took pity on her and gave her a place to give birth, and it was twins. So Artemis was the first one. She's the firstborn, and she immediately, as soon as she's born, she becomes midwife or doula for her mother and helps deliver her own brother Apollo. And so that's why she's got, she's also got this fertility motif, and she's seen as someone to assist in birth. And I just really liked that too, because for one, I feel like even without having children myself or giving birth, I do still feel that creative aspect. I don't feel like that's something I've rejected or not me, just because that's not been my specific experience. And I do care very much about other women, having rights to birth, but also being safe for it. I want women to have the care that they need. Women that do want to be moms, I want them to be taken very well care of, and so yeah, so that's just something that I feel that I don't know. I just really like the idea that there can be kind of these conflicting parts of us, and really just a whole person. Anyway,
Isn't Artemis represented by the owl as well?
yeah,
Isn't
because
she represented by the owl
the
in her
owl and
mythology?
also a stag, and then also the moon, because I think like she gets kind of the nighttime motif, and then Apollo
Yeah,
gets
and I feel like women get the most beautiful part of symbology, which is the night,
yeah,
which is so interesting that men are identified with the sun, which we see the Son of God, and women are identified with that nighttime aura, the moon, that same kind of duality, the yin and the yang.
yeah,
And you see that in all throughout like mythology and history. And women have always had that kind of, like you said, in ancient religions, this woman figure who is a deity or a goddess who represents the opposite of man, which man can be weak or war or greed or lust, and women always represent like that soft, powerful, like I think even more like can be more destructive, like as
yeah,
a Debbie, like the god of arms, like so
yeah.
I love the conversation of female divinity, and that's a really beautiful like way to interpret yourself too.
And also, one thing that I wanted to bring into this is like what you are doing, Maven, that centers you, that excites you, like meditation or going for a walk or looking at flowers or something. And in preparatory to that, I just wanted to say my mom lived in Arizona and she loved to garden, even though it was Arizona. And it was basically she moved around rocks all the time. Like, oh, look how pretty my rock garden is. Yeah, it looks like a bunch of rocks. But she loved doing it, right? And my wife
Yeah.
currently paints as a
Oh
way
yeah,
of getting her divine femininity and the thing that centers her and makes her have worth. So Maven, what do you do that gives
that's
you?
a good question. I think I mean, honestly, right now, I think the stuff that I do with reproductive rights is, I think, me really trying to tune into that, and especially because I am trying to really uh, focus on the aspect of motherhood and children. Um, but like I mean, like without it just expands. I just women's healthcare is really not great in the United States. Even before the Dobbs decision, like we had a really like high maternal fatality rate that just we shouldn't have, and I think it's just because we're not listened to enough. And I have so many friends that have had issues like with their reproductive systems where just debilitating pain or just some kind of dysfunction. My my good friend growing up, when she finally like started her period, it was almost, she bled almost more days than she didn't. And even as an adult, it affected her ability to work and to go to school a lot, because it would just take so much from her. And as much as like she really wanted to be a mother, she just was never able to. And so at one point, she was really trying to get a hysterectomy just so that she could just like move on and live her life and and be able to work and consistently, and yeah, all this stuff. And she could not get one despite a lifetime, like from 11 years old of issues, until she just got to the point where she told her doctor, like, look, I'm either like you're gonna have to take it out. Either you do it and we schedule it and it's safe, or finish it because I'm going to start cutting this out of my body. And he got some kind of like a mental health exception kind of pushed through insurance so that she could have that, you know. And then also just culturally, like, especially for a culture that supposedly loves mothers, I really dislike the I guess like breastfeeding phobia that it kind of exists. And this is something my sister-in-law internalized. So when she had given birth to my niece, and I lived in the same house as them, I had, you know, my section and then she had hers, and it just she would say, when, you know, when it was time to feed, she would say, I'm sorry, I need to, you know, feed my baby. I'll go in the room, you know, while everyone else is here, or I don't want to make you uncomfortable. It was always like all of this apologetic language. And so I kept telling her over and over, like, this is your house, you know. So if you should not have to go into another room unless you want to, if that's what you want, because you want some quiet and privacy. But, you know, if you want to be in the living room, I was just like, it's your house, you know, and so you can tell me to leave. You can tell me to leave anytime. And I just did that every time she asked. And over time, she'd started to kind of just like take that on herself. And then towards the end, she would just tell people, you know, usually family, she's not breastfeeding like with the, you know, strangers or guests over, but with family members, she would just be like, I'm going to feed my baby now. And, you know,
I also feel like that's such a modesty thing. Like, it was really weird. Like, I had no problem breastfeeding my children in front of my husband, or like even in front of my best girlfriend, like, because it's normal. But like to whip my boob out in front of my father-in-law, I was kind of like, this is weird. Like, there is an exposure to your body.
Yeah, and I guess I should clarify. I don't think she ever did that in front of any men other than, of course, my brother, her husband. But
I don't know if that's just Mormonism in me, or just like maybe like my own sense of like autonomy. Like, I don't just do that in front of other people. Like, right now on this podcast, I wouldn't just do that, you know? Like, so it's weird to say, because I have this baby, I'm going to like, hey, get it now, see my tits, okay?
You know what I mean? I think that's what got me. And it wasn't like I don't want to, but it just seemed like she was really uncomfortable with her body, like I said, and then uncomfortable, you know, doing like in her house, you know, and so that's why I was just like,
and for sure there is like, well, we could go on that topic forever, but then anyway, there is something with that.
That's like my femininity. I do like creating things. I'm not often as creative, but I do like that too when I attempt to garden things. And that's what I used to always think, that I wasn't artistic at all, like in any way, or not very creative. And I don't know, there's actually a lot of ways that you can be creative. And often when I had to, or I was forced to, I was often quite pleased with what I was ending up able to do. So but anyway, and the creation, again, I think that is very female. And even in the goddesses, the creation aspect wasn't necessarily always giving birth. Sometimes it was land and gardening, and, you know, so that's food production, this kind of stuff. So there's a lot of ways.
Well, and look at the power of women with their ability to create life and then nurture it. Let's just go into that, because a man does not have that ability. And I'm sorry, we're different, boys. Okay, we're cool. You're not cool. No, I was kidding. I mean, I always felt like it's a very powerful gift to be able to create life, because that was the most like jaw-dropping moment in my development and maturity and evolution, was becoming a mother. Like, literally life altering. Like, all of a sudden you're like, what the heck? I've been invaded. And that thing takes over your brain. Like, I don't care what age your kids are, from the moment they're conceived until the moment they're gone. And even after that, you will constantly think about them. And I think that's the power of religion, is because we do want to understand, especially with like bad medicine, like what happens to a woman who loses multiple children? What does that do to her psychology? There has to be something there as a safeguard as far as religion to say, oh, families can be together forever, or oh, there is an eternal plan, or oh, there is a heaven, or oh, there is a God who loves children. So in a way, it's like a mental like placebo to make you feel okay, because that ability to lose and create life is, I know it affects men, but on a female level, it's definitely something that affects females different than men.
Yeah.
And I think any woman who's ever like wanted to get pregnant, couldn't get pregnant, accidentally got pregnant and went, oh shit. Like there's so many emotions that run into that world or that experience.
Yeah.
And it's, I mean, I think that's a beautiful mission,
I'm with
is
you.
to support.
And that was another thing too that I felt
female-
kind of about the church, is that it really tries to control every aspect of that decision that we're making but just by pushing women, like, first of all, like, to marry young, marry quick. Ideally, you shouldn't be on birth control.
Let the babies come. Let the babies
Right,
come.
exactly. And even if you're not ready. And so I a friend of mine she expressed feeling that she had more children than she probably would have chosen, and also like way too young and way too close together, and she was just exhausted all the time. She said she expressed that she felt that she was, robbed of some of the inherent joy of motherhood that she would have been able to have on her own timetable and with her own choice. And so that was something I was remembering and thinking too, was just like, boy, even when it comes to the choices about birth, like, it's the men in the church that are telling us when and how many, and it's not theirs. It's not
Well,
theirs.
what is interesting is I think they've lost kind of the power, because that was definitely like modus operandi in any of our demographic.
Mhm.
Growing up was within the church. You let those baby come, and any baby you got was just another spirit added, and there wasn't like a safeguard.
Yeah.
And also like there was a lot of shame. But I think the church, like, now women, and you can
They've
even
lost a
see
lot
it
of
in the
ground.
birth records or the statistics in Utah. Now the average family is maybe 3 children
Yeah.
per young married couple, versus in my generation, it was like 6 to 8,
I had
bigger
a big sister
families.
that had 14 children.
Oh.
So
So, okay, boys, what do you guys think? Or ladies,
was
anyone
there
else have?
a comment? Yeah.
Let's let
Yes.
Heidi. Is it Heidi's
Yeah,
turn?
yeah, sure. I'll speak on this. I actually think it's hysterical that the church holds women down when the last most sought after blessing, the second anointing, is sealed by a woman at the end.
Right?
I'm
Your feet have to get
saying.
washed by her.
Well,
I'm
she
gonna-
goes home
I'm
and
gonna need to
seals
run.
it
So
in
was
the
there-
marital bedroom. Yeah. So
I just wanted to know, was there a question for me? I think, did you have a comment about something that I had said? It seemed like.
Oh no, sorry. I thought they were just telling me
No.
to go.
Yeah, no,
Sorry.
Oh,
Maven
no,
can
no,
bounce.
no. Yeah.
Maven can bounce, and Heidi has the floor.
Thanks,
Oh,
everyone.
Bye, Maven.
Thank you for
Thank you,
dropping by,
Maven.
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 Take care.
So for
Oh, I was just gonna say, I feel like the women have had it worse, and I think, yeah, I'm kind of privileged being a convert, because being an adult coming in a few years ago when a lot of changes have been made anyway, I didn't really see it. And I'm finding out about like all of this now, you know what I mean? Where it's like, just coming in, it's like, yeah, people are a little weird, but I mean, everyone seems okay. And then, listening to just women tell horrific stories of abuse and whatever. And it's like, it's very lopsided in my anecdotal observation. I could be wrong, but it seems to be very, very lopsided.
Imagine a culture here in Utah, but even earlier, where everyone is practically converts, like you are. Nobody really is hearing all of anything that's going on, and if you were to speak up about it, you could find yourself not just out of the church. You could find that your crops don't get water on the next rotation.
well,
You could find that you could
back then
you could
you'd be
find
to society because you're not married. So that was a quote.
that too.
Yeah.
You know, I just want to say that I think that is my favorite comment of the evening, Exmo Joe, that systems that harm women harm men too, and
Mhm.
systems that harm men harm women too. And if you look at all of the polygamist spin-offs, there are so many men in those systems who will never get wives because they're all taken by the men who are higher in the hierarchy, in the dominance than they are. They call these young men the lost boys, the ones who will never get to get married. They're ostracized from their society. And a system in which you can get women to oppress themselves is the ultimate repression. And that's exactly what we have in Mormonism. And it's not good for women and it's not good for men. It's a situation in a culture where people are not allowed to be human beings. They are not allowed to fully embrace all of the dark and light sides of themselves. They have to compartmentalize and shame themselves in order to fit into that system. And that's not good for anyone. All of us need the autonomy, the freedom, and the ability to fully express our humanity in all of its forms, and to not have to shame the parts of ourselves that don't fit into a religious system that was built by someone who was unhealthy and repressed and was a predator. And I just think it's wild. I don't think Joseph Smith ever envisioned that this church would grow to this size, or that it would be as prominent or as successful financially as it is today. I think he probably would be shocked about it, because all he wanted was money, power, and sex for himself. I don't think he was thinking one generation beyond that. I don't think he was thinking anywhere near into the future. All he wanted was what he wanted, and he got it. He got killed for it. But look at how it's perpetuated. And look at the thing that blows my mind is that the reason why it got perpetuated, I think, is because he was killed. If he hadn't been killed, we wouldn't have this historical persecution complex that kept us doubling down and buying back in and literally leaving the country and losing our lives across the plains to search for a religious freedom that really was never, it was an illusion to begin with. There was nothing being taken away from us in the first place, and there was nothing being given to us when we got to Utah in the second place. And it's just this ridiculous perpetuation of a cycle that never should have started in the first place. And what I love is connecting with all of you beautiful human beings who have broken that cycle and who said, this shit ends with me. No more.
Yeah, there's
That
a
is
saying-
beautiful. Like
That was beautiful. That was beautiful. There's.
I know. I'm like, yes,
That's my favorite.
yes.
There's a
My
saying
favorite
around
comment
that.
of the evening.
There's a saying
I
around
wish
that.
I knew how to do shorts.
That right
Just
there should be a
flip it. We
short.
could-
That is like
I
the
can-
most
I can help you
powerful
with
thing
that.
I've
I
ever
can help
heard ever.
Yeah, we'll have a workshop. We'll have a podcast
help
of
you.
workshops soon.
I'll help you make the short. But there's a saying that goes exactly with what Megan said, and trying to remember it. But basically, it's the silence of a martyr screams louder than the cries of a zealot.
There you go.
And
Amen.
I'm kind of leaning towards that because I'm still learning a lot. I'm still taking it all in, and I appreciate you guys letting me come here and learn.
Can I tell you the gospel of a great martyr by the name of Korihor, the martyr of reason? My exemplar.
Shameless
Korihor.
YouTube plug coming now.
That's right. Speaking of shameless YouTube,
But yeah, I'm kind of leaning toward that too, because that's something I've been thinking of myself, and not just with Joseph Smith, but people in general. It's like, how many like dictators, Hitler or whoever, right? Had they just been, I don't know, allowed to be fizzled out or rot away in prison somewhere, just people, not even just Joseph Smith, how many like world movements and like cults and other things would have collapsed? Exactly. Because of that.
That somebody could do a book on that. That'd be interesting. Find out little movements that got snuffed out.
Well,
So
and why do humans want to just literally dominate other humans and kill them? Because, like, if you want to look through history, our genetic DNA says we literally are the meanest to each other, first and foremost. before we would kill another animal. In fact, like some people are like mad if you kick a puppy, but you can beat your wife and no one's caring about it.
Although
Like,
I'd like to push back, and I would like to say staying alive is genetically positive for passing your genes on.
Who's kicking
the
puppies?
song by the Bee Gees
Nobody.
or the
Nobody
actual
heard
staying alive?
No, I'm just saying that
Puppies.
there are examples of people that do that, right? And we have lots of genes that are in us that have been passed down through the lines, and some of them get turned off and some of them. But, you know, what is genetically positive has been community and sticking together and sticking up for everyone. That's the long-term thing. And then we started, you know, planting wheat kernels and in Egypt and whatever, and it created a whole system of society. And so we're working through our societal problems still today. And, you know, normally we go like 90 minutes for the show, and then we say goodbye. And then after the show, we talk for another 90 minutes a lot of times. And so we've gone a little bit long now for the show. I don't know if it's good or bad or otherwise, but we could say goodbye to everybody in a little bit.
Well, Megan ended it so perfectly with
Yeah,
her
she ended it
statements.
perfectly.
I think really like
It was really
beautiful
good.
way of explaining it here at the
And
end.
that was really good. And so I'll just say that I'm going to be interviewing Heidi soon. I've already interviewed Megan. I've already interviewed Debbie Donovan. Someday, Diamond Dave will be interviewed, I predict. Who else have I interviewed? Joe.
You've interviewed
Me.
Joe. You've interviewed everyone on this panel besides Diamond
and
Heidi.
and
We'll
Heidi.
have-
Oh yes, Heidi.
Gotta
Sorry,
get
Heidi.
that. Gotta get on that. Gotta get on that.
Yeah, so we're gonna get on that. So check out Ladder Daily Digest, since this is multiple channels we're streaming, and look
Hey,
for
we're
those interviews.
creating a community of people who are just interested in being interesting, and
That's
that's
right.
why I think Gene like celebrates content creators and also individuals and wants to put together panels and hear their voices, hear their stories, and it's absolutely amazing.
So thank you, and so thanks everybody for participating. Thanks everybody for watching. Have a great rest of the week, rest of the month, rest of the year. Get your Christmas shopping done, unless you're like me and either A, you don't believe in it for monetary reasons, or you have somebody that does it all for you, or you just want to do your own thing. And so anyway, have a good
Thank you, Gene.
rest of the week. Bye-bye.
Have a good night.
Good night.
I like hellfire.
Softball.
That's right. And so